Dreo, who is sponsoring this video, sent me this newer, bigger air purifier which moves about twice as much air as this unit that I tested last year, and this one already did quite well. But I figure this time I'll test it in more of a real-life scenario. My wife's parents heat part of the house with a wood stove, and often when opening the stove to make a fire or add wood, some smoke comes out. They set up this box fan with a furnace filter taped to it to clear some of the particulate from the air, and it's cheap and effective, but it's kind of loud, and you have to remember to turn it on after there's some smoke. And I was thinking, instead, let's try this Dreo air purifier in automatic mode, and it'll turn itself on when it needs to, no need to think about it, and it's not very loud. But first I want to capture a baseline with the box fan setup. It's plugged into a smart plug which I'm monitoring so I can tell how much is being run. And I hooked up this particle counter to a Raspberry Pi computer, which I'm hiding in a laundry closet right up here, and the sensor itself is here. Plus I've got some temperature sensors here and here. It'll give me an idea if the wood stove is actually being used. And that's been running for a week now. Let's look at the graphs. This is a graph of the whole week. Red is the temperatures, gray is particle counts, and blue is power consumption of the box fan. Now that's all a bit much for one graph, so let's look at one particular day. And we can see the box fan was turned on here, here, and here, but the particle counts were high here, so kind of missed that maximum time. This is the day afterwards, and the particle counts were high here when the fire was made. You can see the temperature went up shortly thereafter, and the box fan was run briefly, and it did knock down the particles. Here again, I think the wood stove was stoked based on the temperature rise afterwards, and they ran the box fan for a bit, but then there's a whole lot of particulate that happened afterwards, and I think that is actually just from the kitchen, which is different kinds of particulate, not nearly as irritating as smoke. And again here we see spikes in the particulate count, but it didn't always turn on the box fan. And that's because you can't directly sense that smoke, so it's hard to know exactly when to turn on the box fan. After a week, I switched the box fan over for the Dreo in automatic mode, and I watched the particle counts again. So with 1 week, we don't see the Dreo turning on all that much. So for instance, here's the 25th of January, a spike in particulate, and the Dreo does nothing. It does move up and down a tiny bit, but that's mostly from turning on the lights on its own, which times out after about 12 hours. Next day, again, a huge spike. It does seem to turn on a little bit extra beyond just turning the lights on. Then on the 29th of January, we had a humongous spike. They had a hard time getting a wood stove going, so a lot of smoke came out, and the Dreo did run a fair bit, but then in the subsequent spikes, we don't really see it doing anything. And this is where I got a bit frustrated, because the idea of this video was to show how the Dreo in automatic mode would just turn on when you need to turn it on, whereas with the box fan, you often forget to or whatnot, but it just wasn't turning on. And super frustrating. I mean, this is supposed to be a sponsored video. I wanted to show how well this thing worked, and it didn't work. Emailed with Dreo trying to figure it out, but couldn't figure it out. But then I realized smoke rises. That's why the advice if there's smoke in a fire is to stay low. So my particle sensor, which is fairly high up, was picking that up, but the Dreo being down here wasn't. And by smoke, I don't mean thick billowing smoke, just very low concentrations of smoke that you can kind of smell and sense, but you can't really see it. So I asked my father-in-law if maybe we could hang this thing from the ceiling, but there really isn't a good place to hang it up there. And then I suggested, you know, something about the height of this shelf would be just about right. It's too bad this shelf is way too narrow. But he just said, why don't you just build something to extend it? I didn't want to build something just to try this out, so I cut out a piece of plywood and used 2 of my long-range clamps to hold that in place for the time being. It's only temporary for testing. So now with the air purifier very close to where the smoke goes, it actually pulls air in right this side. It does turn on, but it doesn't turn on for very long. It knocks the particle counts down to a, I guess, reasonable level, and then it turns off again. And with me checking the power consumption on that thing only every 3 minutes, I think sometime it was done turning on and turning back off again between my sampling, so I had to actually up the sample rate to catch everything. And now when the particle count spiked, the Dreo did turn on, although only very briefly here. turn on a little bit here. Another day it spiked on here and turned on briefly, and I guess at that point it decided that this level was acceptable, which I was hoping it would knock it down further. And I'm wondering, maybe here in New Brunswick we're just real wusses about air quality in that we expect air to be really clean, whereas in any major urban environment or in China, what is considered clean air is a lot more particles than we're used to here. But then I realized the unit rarely went faster than low, and you can barely hear it running on low, so why not just leave it running on low the whole time? I should add there's also a mobile app which allows you to control this thing remotely over the internet, and you can set the level that way to much finer granularity. This is set to high now. But I've been running it actually on level 5, which is a bit lower than low, and that makes it nice and quiet. And this is now running it constantly at a very low setting, so you can see the particle count spike in a few places. The power consumption doesn't really move very much. Again, that slight little step is just the light on it turning on and off. It probably turned on the light here when it sensed that the air quality was bad, and it just left it on for a while. But overall, it knocked that particle count way down, so this is running constantly at low speed, whereas this, for instance, is in automatic mode, where anything like below this level is considered to be okay. Constant low, automatic, constant low. So particle counts are way down. And my wife, growing up in this house, always found the bit of smoke that came out of the wood stove just to be a bit irritating. So if this had been there the whole time, that probably would have not been an issue. And the box fan and filter would have probably gone a long way to address this issue as well. The problem is you have to remember to turn it on when you need to, because you can't leave it on because it's kind of loud. And the next thing I need to build is some other way of clamping this shelf on here, because my mother-in-law doesn't like the color scheme of these blue clamps, and besides, I want my long reach clamps back, because in exchange for letting me film at their house, they get to keep this one, and they don't want to let it go at all. So despite my difficulties with the automatic mode and what I had to say about it, this is still a sponsored video. I guess these guys are pretty cool to work with. And presently there is an 18% discount on this thing if you purchase it off the Dreo website. And there's also an Amazon purchase link. Please see the video descriptions for the links and details.